All right. Give people a couple minutes to join the webinar. But yeah, hello everyone. My name is John Baker. Today we're going to be talking all about workflows and automations, specifically the 5 essential workflows for IT success. Now, just a couple of important housekeeping notes for an optimal connection. We recommend that you use computer audio in place of telephone connection. All of your microphones are automatically set on mute to limit background noise, so we cannot see you and we cannot hear you. But throughout this webinar, we want to keep it a little bit more interactive and really want to encourage you to ask questions through the chat in the bottom of the screen or through the Q&A section on the screen. And throughout, we're also going to have some polls. And these polls definitely want to encourage you to participate in them, as we will have a raffle drawing at the end. We'll notify a winner afterwards, and it's going to be based on those of you who answer all of the poll questions. You'll be entered for a chance to win that gift card. So once again, my name is John Baker. We're talking all about automation. I've got my my friend and teammate Tracy, who's helping out in the background, and she's going to be helping out with some of the technical side, as well as interrupting if I ever start talking, forgetting to come back to a point or anything like that. But here's a little bit about our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about, first of all, the barriers to automation and how do you overcome them. We're going to look at some recent research that kind of identifies the things that get in the way of workflows, that get in the way of our automation. Then we're going to transition to talking about the 5 essential workflows for IT. And I hope throughout this webinar that it's not so much about how Torii necessarily can help, but these are about the principles of automation, and these can really apply to your situation in different ways. And so hopefully throughout this that you understand that we're really just trying to give you the principles, a better understanding of how you can bring these kinds of automations to your daily work. And then we're going to jump into the workflow engine within Torii, and I'm actually going to show you how these work. And we're going to wrap it up with the questions and answers at the end. But before we get started, I'd just like to know, where is your organization in its automation journey? We've got a couple of different options here. You should be able to answer this poll. There should be a pop-up on your screen that gives you a couple of different options. We've got A, there's no automation and there's no plans for automation. There's B, there's no automation, but you're planning to start in the next year. And maybe this webinar is a way to kind of kickstart that initiative. C, maybe up to 20% of your SaaS operations are already automated, but you're looking to expand that. Or D, more than 50% of your SaaS operations are currently automated. So if you just want to take a couple minutes, answer that question. And while you're thinking through that, I'm going to talk about these automation barriers. There's 5 major automation barriers, and this came out of a recent article from Forbes. The first one is just insufficient data. And that's not to say the data doesn't exist, but maybe you don't have access to it. Another possibility is that you have access to data, but you don't really trust it, or it's inaccurate. There might be a systemic issue. There might be something else within your organization that makes you take pause and hesitate before taking action based on that data. Another possibility is that things are siloed in your organization. Could be the processes, could be the systems. It could literally just be the people that you need to do these things. You don't have that communication happening between them. Now, I'm going to pause at this point, and Tracy, I'm wondering if we have the results from that last poll. All right, so it looks like a lot of people are kind of in that middle range. I'm seeing that out of all the respondents, there's a lot of focus kind of in that no automation, but planning to start in the next year. Or there's also a good number of people who said that up to 20% of your SaaS operations are automated. So that's really interesting. We've got a lot of people here who are already kind of in that mindset of either we need to start really soon, or we've kind of started, but we need to expand. And that's really great to understand. I want to say that you're definitely in the right space for that kind of a situation. So kind of coming back to these common automation barriers, number 4 is that there's a lack of ready-made tools or lack of a platform for it. This kind of relates to that previous one with the siloed processes and systems, where a lot of automation tools out there are really point solutions. They do one thing really well, but it limits the automation to only the resources within the control of that piece of software. They don't really offer a holistic method to automate processes throughout your organization. And the last one is just that you're adding too much complexity too quickly. Sometimes the thought of automation can really feel like overwhelm because it's not just about adding another tool. It's about rethinking the way that tools and people and processes all kind of come together. And it's a big initiative, but it's an important initiative and it's one that you need to get started with. So out of those five, I'm really interested to find out, what automation barrier have you experienced? Now, for most of us, it's probably kind of all of the above. But let me rephrase this. If you were to say today, what is the number one barrier that's prevented you from either starting with automation or going a little further with automation? What would the answer be for that? So I'll give people the opportunity to answer that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to kind of talk about these 5 essential workflows. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because, like I said, we're about to jump into the demo environment and you'll actually be able to see for yourself. But these are the 5 workflows we're going to be talking through today. The first one is about new app discovery. And, there's a lot of shadow IT. That's just the reality of it. SaaS infiltrates our organizations, not through malicious means, but just because people add the tools they need to get the job done. And there's no getting around that. So this is about automating the process through which you're able to kind of uncover the shadow IT as it's being adopted, and then vet those applications so that you have better visibility and better awareness as you go forward. Another one we're going to be talking about, and this is kind of two, is the onboarding and offboarding. And so you probably have some familiarity with different onboarding and offboarding automations. Okta is a very popular one, but we're going to be adding a little bit more detail to how you can augment. Maybe if you do have an existing process, you can augment that process, or if you're just getting started, you can do that from the ground up. Next, we're going to look at application access requests. This is all about when people need a new app and you don't want them to just go and, go to Google and find something, find shadow IT. This is about having a workflow in place that's going to help you with that. This is actually a really important one that often gets overlooked. And it's important because it's really critical to retention, especially of younger employees. There's some recent research that said that 42% of millennials said that they would leave an org due to substandard technology. So if you don't have a great option in place for them, a lot of people will either add the shadow IT or they're going to just leave. So I'm going to pause again. And Tracy, wondering if we have the results from that previous poll. All right. So it looks like people are not worried about insufficient data, but inaccurate data, siloed processes and systems, and lack of ready-made tools. Those are the 3 that kind of received some of the votes. And it seems like siloed processes and systems is a number 1. And that makes sense because that's how a lot of our orgs are just kind of organically forming these days. You get hired into a department for a specific role, and then the people within those teams, they're looking out for number 1 as an organization. And like I said, it's not malicious, it's just kind of human nature. And so when you have these siloing effects, you have these processes and these tools that kind of become insulated from the rest of the organization. But IT is in a really unique situation where they kind of exist at this intersection of tools, systems, processes, people, licenses, applications, all of these things. IT is kind of in the middle for all of those things. And so it puts you in a really difficult but exciting potential position to try to bridge those gaps. So we're going to be talking about that throughout this. Returning to the workflows that we're going to be looking at going forward, we also are going to talk through what do you do with unused licenses? If someone hasn't used a license for 60 days, 90 days, do you have a way to, first of all, identify that? And second of all, do something about it. A lot of, there's stats all over the internet. One here from HelpNet Security saying 53% of SaaS licenses are wasted, meaning they're either completely unnecessary, or maybe they have a tier of the license where they don't use all the features and like a basic version of the same product would do well enough for them. And then finally, we're going to look at contract renewals. And this is a really important one. It's also a really annoying one. Contracts are kind of a pain in the butt for IT. So you have procurement professionals, finance professionals, application owners. It feels like they should be handling a lot of these contracts, but the reality is that none of those teams really have a lot of the insight into the details about the usage of the tools that these contracts relate to. And I think that's made very evident by the statistic where $23 billion in SaaS spend reduction opportunities go unclaimed each year. So now we're going to take this as going to be our last poll. We're actually going to stay on the screen for a minute. I want everyone to kind of have the opportunity to answer this because it's going to kind of influence where we focus on in the webinar for the rest of our time here. We're about to jump into the demo instance. So I'd really appreciate if everyone takes a minute and kind of answers this. But I want to know, what is your organization's automation priority? Is it shadow IT or discovery? Is it employee management, such as like those onboarding and offboarding processes? Is it about license management when people are asking for new applications? Or maybe it's about cost saving through license and app optimization, or maybe it is through renewal management. So what is your organization's top priority as it relates to automation? Give people a couple minutes, and then Tracy, whenever you're ready, you can show those results. All right. So I'm going to get out of full screen here. So actually, Tracy, I accidentally exited out of those poll results, but if you could read those off to me, I'd really appreciate it. We're doing it live, people, as evidenced.
Yeah, we've got about 55% of people are saying cost savings, license and app optimization. And then we've got followed by employee management, onboarding and offboarding at 27%.
Okay. Well, so then I think it makes sense then if we're talking about cost savings, I think we're actually going to jump right over to the reclaiming licenses first. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce those of you who maybe aren't familiar. This is Torii. Say hi to Torii. Hi, Torii. And we're looking right now at the application view. And I kind of want to start here because it's important to understand that everything else that we're going to be talking about today starts with having good data. So you'll see here, what we're looking at right now is within this instance, it's showing you all of the applications that are in this environment, showing you what they are, the expenses associated with it, usage, active contract value. But I want to bring your attention to this right over here with the sources. When we're looking at the sources, the reason why we have such high confidence in the quality of the data is because we have multiple sources here. It could be based on your Azure or your Salesforce information. It could be a direct integration. It could be using Torii's browser extension, which monitors for people using a corporate email when signing up for new applications. So there's multiple ways to get these pieces of data into Torii. And then with that information, you're able to take higher confidence action, because what we talked about earlier, where you were concerned with inaccurate data, you can leave those concerns behind because you have multiple sources kind of reaffirming the data integrity that's happening within Torii. So with that in mind, we're going to jump into the workflows, but since we're talking about this, so we're going to be jumping over into our workflows. And instead of kind of starting with the discovery, we're going to jump over into the reclamation. And I'm going to do this based on kind of a specific example. So one of the ways that Torii works is that as it's understanding the specificity of all your different applications, and it's looking at the utilization rates for all of these different applications, you can kind of prioritize which of these licenses, maybe they're more expensive or you want to pay more attention to them. And then with that information, you can build out different workflows for different kinds of applications. And so we're going to use the example of O365 or Office 365. And you'll say down here, you select which applications you actually want to be a part of this workflow. And then essentially what you're looking at this point, you'll see up here, it says inactivity period. So what it's looking for right now is it's when users are going in, they're using these applications. Maybe, someone started day one, they got a bunch of applications, but then over time, you find out which ones they're actually using. Maybe 60 days goes by, maybe 90 days, 180 days, totally up to you. But a certain period goes by and, Bob from accounting, sorry, Bob, always using you as an example. Bob from accounting, he hasn't been using this aspect of Office 365. So you could keep paying for that license and essentially just be paying for Bob to not utilize this tool. Or you can have this kind of a workflow that's going to look for that 60-day inactivity before it triggers this. Now, what's cool with Torii, we've got this Canvas workflow, this Canvas UI. This was something that was just launched in September, and I adore it. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. But the thing I love about it is that I can look at this workflow and I kind of get what it's doing. I see right here, you've got this if-else branch. And what this branch is doing right here is I've got these different workflows, this conditional workflow that's based on the title. So I've got one that it's checking if they are in the C-suite, and it's looking at that based on the Bamboo HR data. And so it looks in Bamboo HR, it looks at their job title, and if it contains chief, I know they're in the C-suite, and so they're going to go over here. Same thing for here, for example, we've got the leadership team as designated by your Okta groups. You can pick out which tool you want to be your source of truth for determining all of the criteria about these individuals within your company. And so based on that, you have the inactivity, then you have this branching that kind of splits it out to these different possibilities. Let's say if this person is in the C-suite, you probably don't want to just rip away their license. You know, that's not technical advice, that's more political advice. You can take that for free. I recommend you don't take the CEO's license without consulting them. So what we're going to do instead is we'll actually send out a Slack notification, and you can pick the user that you want to see it. And so in this case, I'm telling myself, it's like, hey, just so you know, this user who's in the C-suite, they stopped using this app, this license, but this is a personal note I put in. Since they are your boss, no action was taken. And so it's like, that's fine. I have awareness that we have some idle licenses, but they belong to people who are important within this organization, so I'm not doing anything about it. Next, we've got the leadership team. So what's happening here is that it's actually going to send them a request approval, and this is going to be happening through Slack. And you see right here, we're using this personalization token for the user. And so it's going to send to that user a message, and it's going to say, hey, we've noticed that you haven't used this app in a while. Can we reclaim that license? And it's going to give them two buttons, either, yeah, you can reclaim it, or no, I want to hang on to it. And then based on what they select, it's either going to unassign them and then remove them from the relevant Okta group, or nothing will happen. And then you can have other contingencies for if this person is not leadership and they're not C-suite and they haven't used it for 60 days, it's just going to automatically deprovision them. And so this is really a great example of how you can kind of prioritize and look at a multivariate situation where it's not just about activity, but it's also looking at things related to their title and you can look at things like the price of the tool, and it gives you a really just a much more nuanced way to address inactive licenses. So now we're going to jump back to our workflows view, and I want to go back to that kind of discovery piece. We're going to go over it pretty quick, but this just kind of gives you an idea of how you can be proactive with those kinds of things. So we have this right here, workflow for new app discovered. Tell me more. It's not a Grease reference. Just happens to be my wife's favorite movie, but that aside. So we've got new app discovered. And you saw earlier we had all of those sources, and they're constantly monitoring. You can think of it like the Eye of Sauron, and Shadow IT is like Frodo entering into Mordor. Except the difference is that the Eye of Sauron is good because it's you, and Frodo is... The metaphor actually breaks down, so ignore that metaphor. The point is, Torii is constantly monitoring, and it's looking over the landscape, and it's giving you that updated insight into what the landscape of your SaaS actually looks like. So we've got a new app discovered. It's going to send a Slack notification. You can pick who you want that person to be who gets notified. And all it's doing is saying, hey, found a new app. Thought you should know. And it's just a notification. And what you want to do from there, it's totally up to you how in-depth you want to get. But one of the things we definitely recommend and what we have implemented here at Torii is that it's also going to send out an application. It's going to send them a form, basically, a request for information to that user. And you can fill it up with all these personalization tokens, which there are a lot of personalization tokens within Torii that you can use. And it's going to send them an email that's going to look like this, and it'll just say, hey, we saw that you added some new software to the company. We'd like to know some more information about it. It's going to have a button here for them to answer a form. And when they click over, and this is what that form is going to look like from their perspective. And so it's just going to say, hey, please fill this out. Here's the app. And you can pick out what are the fields here. What are the things, the critical pieces of information. It can be about the app itself, who's the owner, what's the cost, all those kinds of things. You can ask for GDP compliance. You can ask for security concerns, whether or not customer data is going to be uploaded. But I included here the annual cost total, because then you can also create branches based on the results of that. So for instance, if they said that the cost is greater than $1,000, I've got this branch that says, if they say that, it's actually going to send out a Slack notification to our finance guy and just give him a heads up that a new app was discovered. The person who added it to the organization is saying that there's going to be annual spend associated with it. Here's their details. And the point of this is that what you've done is proactively remove the level of communication that you would otherwise kind of be pulled into. You're connecting people with the source of information. It's happening automatically. And so you're not getting stuck in the middle of email threads or Slack messages, but it's being handled proactively. So this is, like I said, that new app discovery, it's really powerful. One of our customers, actually, Pipedrive, day one, hooked up Torii. They found 600 applications, 600 shadow IT apps. Those were apps that they were not anticipating finding in their organization. But through these automations, through these workflows, they never get to that bloated shadow IT state again. They have full visibility into all the apps that were within their organization from that point going forward. So next, we're going to look at the onboarding. And for this, we're going to look at, this workflow for employee onboarding. And we'll keep this one pretty quick, because you've already kind of got an idea for the branching capabilities. And this is just to let you know that you can you have some different ways that you can trigger these kind of workflows. So in this case, we've got an onboarding workflow that's going to look at Bamboo HR and look for people who have a hire date that's less than 5 days from now. And it's going to kick off this workflow. But what you can also do is actually change this so that, say, for instance, that hire date is set to today, but then you're going to click right here on the schedule option. And when you do the schedule option, it lets you say, I want Torii to check out the hire status for anybody. Whenever it is today, it's going to run this workflow on Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. And so that way you always know that you have the appropriate number of licenses applied to the right individuals, and you don't have this overlapping period of licenses that are assigned to inactive users before their start date. So that's just an example of what you can do. And then you see here what it's going to do. It's going to create their Google Workspace, create the Slack, and then it's going to branch out. And you have these different possibilities based on their departments, where for sales, creating Salesforce, add them to a group, add them to Slack groups. And these are all just examples. We have some pretty powerful integrations with all these kind of workplace, SSO, IDP, all these kinds of applications that really ensure that you can get people up and running from day one. And that's really important, because onboarding, it's kind of got a twofold impact. On the one hand, you want to onboard right, because it means that you have better security compliance, because people only have access to the apps that they should. It's also going to prevent a lot of bloated spend when you're not sending out licenses to people maybe that they don't need based on their department. But there's another aspect to it, which is about that the retention of that individual. You want to give them a great experience right from the get-go. And that means that you don't want a lot of back and forth trying to get credentials, trying to get things set up, trying to deal with logins and different applications. If someone comes in, they have all the tools at their disposal from day one, it is automatically just going to lead to a better overall experience for that employee within the organization. And we actually found one of our customers, Product Board, they were able to automate over an hour and a half of otherwise manual labor through these onboarding workflows that people could get started really fast. But now we're going to look at the flip side of that when we talk about offboarding. And when we talk about offboarding, I think one of the things that Torii does uniquely well is that we look at it and we do it in real time. And so you see here, we've got this real-time trigger. If this is currently available for Google Workspace as well as Okta. And if the user within this workspace or Okta, if the user was archived, suspended, deleted, or assigned to a different org unit, in any of those cases, it's going to set up this event in real time, where it'll change their workspace email, suspend the user, add an alternate email, transfer their data, transfer calendar events, sign them out of their sessions. You can even add custom actions like HTTP requests based on APIs, webhooks, all that kind of stuff. Deactivate the Slack user. And then you can actually also start the employee offboarding. And I won't go too in depth on this, but what you saw previously was all about getting them out of that critical, your SSO tool that gives them access to the keys of the kingdom. You want to take care of that right away. You can also set up these secondary offboarding workflows for maybe less important apps, ones that you do want to have addressed, but it doesn't have to be immediate, things like Wistia or, those kind of tools that you don't want to keep paying for them for a long period. But it's not something that has to be addressed literally right at that second. And you can configure different workflows for all of these. It can be as simple as sending a Jira ticket to the app owner to let them know to suspend or deactivate this user, or it can be, if there's a direct integration, it can be another workflow that'll also automatically deprovision. And then you have this offboarding dashboard within here so that you can see the status of some of these processes and just understand if, for whatever reason, it's getting stuck, where. So nothing is just getting lost. That means you have better security in the long run, and you have better cost savings. So now we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to kind of pick it up from this point. And I want to talk about the access requests first. And to really understand access requests, I'm going to see it kind of from the customer's perspective. If you've got customers, you don't want them adding a lot of shadow IT, it's important that they have a place to go, a place to request new tools. And so we've got this application catalog, and it's really powerful for that. It'll let them go and select what are the sanctioned design tools that I need. Maybe I want access to Figma or something like that, Envato, Adobe. They can go here, select the app, request access. And so that is pretty cool. It's pretty intuitive, and it gives your users a place to go. But what's happening on the back end is really cool as well. What's happening on the back end is that you've actually got all of these access request policies. So some of these tools are maybe lower priority, and it's not something that you necessarily want a big workflow built out for. But some of these more expensive tools where maybe speed is important, but you also want to monitor and control it, these are also really important things. So for example, with Salesforce, if someone fills out that request policy for Salesforce, I've got a workflow here that's going to look on what team are they on? What's their department? And so let's say someone from sales or marketing, if they're asking for Salesforce, just going to give it to them. They probably need it. They should need it, honestly. If they're doing their job, they should need it. And so this is going to create that Salesforce user, send them a Slack notification, and add them to an Okta group. But let's say that individual is from customer success, where maybe they need some of the details, maybe they don't, maybe it's on a case-by-case basis, maybe like enterprise reps need it, but maybe not some of the other ones. In those cases, you can set up a workflow that'll have, it'll send out a notification to their manager and say, hey, this person asked for it. Do you want to approve it or decline it? Basically, leave it up to their judgment. And that's just another example of these kind of proactive opportunities to kind of get ahead of the things that are going to drag you down in back and forth communications. And nobody wants someone just directly emailing IT and saying, hey, can I have a license for this? And they say, well, I don't know. What are you using it for? Like, Salesforce, we have a pretty good understanding, but there's a lot of apps in your organization that you don't know all the details about it. You don't know if they really need it. You don't know if they're going to make the best use of it. And so when you kind of establish these proactive workflows, you're going to get ahead of a lot of those questions and issues. All right. And we've seen this. It's one of our customers actually through these is a pretty tremendous story. They're able to save about 90% of time that was previously spent on those access request policies. They were able to cut out about 90% of that manual process just by having a couple of these workflows for some of those big licenses that were taking up a lot of time. Now, we're going to wrap it up here. And the last one that I want to talk about is all about contract renewals. And this is kind of a good one to end on because it's one of those workflows where it's just getting things done. I don't want to get stuck in discussions about legalese, contracts. I don't want to have to monitor whether or not it has auto renewal clauses, but that it impacts your job. So in this situation, you're letting your SMP kind of handle that. So what we have here is if a contract meets this criteria where the end date is less than 90 days from now, it's going to set off this workflow. And the only branch here is looking at whether or not there's an auto renewal clause within that contract. And it's going to say, if yes, it's going to send them a Slack notification that says, hey, this contract's up for renewal. Please note it does have an auto renewal clause in place. This is the owner of the application. Please consult them for relevant details about usage. This is kind of an important thing. Maybe you've been seeing it. I've included this on a lot of these Slack notifications, is that when you are pinging people, you're notifying them of things, you're also giving them next steps that doesn't involve going to you. So you're basically giving them a direction to go. And maybe you are the point of contact for some of these questions, in which case you put your own name there. But the reality is that in a lot of these cases, people just want to know, okay, what do I do with this information now? Like, notifications are great, but what's the next action I should take on this? And if you give them that information as kind of the next step, it means all of these processes just get a little bit easier. It just makes all of everything kind of work a little bit more fluidly throughout your organization. And so I'm actually going to run this manually real quick, and just say, just going to run this manually, run it now. And so what's going to say is it ran this workflow action. You can view the logs for that. I'm going to go over here. All right. And so you see here, I'm going to drag, hopefully you can all see my Slack, ran it over here. And it just sends me that notification that lets me know that we have this auto renewal clause contained within the contract. And where this is pulling from is over on this renewals page. So you can see here, looking at the calendar view, and you can see you have things about like when there is an auto renewal clause contained within the contract. And the way that you're able to get that information is not through manually entering the data. You do that through adding these contracts. And when you add them into Torii, we've got this AI ingestion tool that's going to parse it, and it's going to look at things like the terms, the dates, the owner, whether or not it does have a renewal clause, and it's going to pull all that information, and it's going to populate those relevant fields for the application and automatically add it to your calendar, so that those workflows can take place based on those different criterias. So this is a very powerful one. Obviously, it's really important for being able to save a lot of money. We actually, one of our customers recently told us, it was HHP Berlin, they realized continuous savings of about $40,000 per renewal period based on that ability to right-size those subscriptions. So with that, it concludes the demo. I just also wanted to point out, within Torii, we're trying to give more and more awareness to what can be done through workflows and automations. And like I said, obviously we're doing this from the perspective of what Torii specifically can do. But the more important thing is that these are the workflows that can really take away as much as, we're looking at like the Pareto principle. What's the 80-20 rule here? What's the small amount, the 5 or 6 workflows that are going to address 80% of your SaaS operation tasks, the things that really kind of weigh you down, bury you in tickets. And these are based on what our customers have given us as feedback, and the things that they say have really transformed the way that their organization operates. We've seen some amazing ROI spreadsheets of people coming in and saying, yeah, this is the dollar amount you can assign to this. This is the dollar amount you can assign to this amount of time spent on this task. And Torii just got rid of that whole manual process, and we saved this much in terms of like opportunity cost. And so just hopefully you're able to take those principles, you can apply it to your situation and your context. Now, if at some point, maybe you had this kind of on in the background, you weren't necessarily watching, but you want to be able to take these different workflows and kind of apply it to your situation. We recently put together this workflow directory, and we're going to be continuously adding new workflows to this. And so what you can do, you go over here, you go to at toriihq.com, go to product, select workflows. That's going to take you to this page. And at this page, we have quick little mock-ups of all those workflows that we went through. And it'll tell you a little bit about them. It'll tell you about some of the successes that some of our customers have had with it, like Paxful, who were able to save over $700,000 in SaaS renewals just by kind of adjusting how they dealt with these contracts and licenses. And it'll be able to give you some more information about how to bring these automations to your organization. And so now at this point, actually, Tracy, I'm going to start. I would like to encourage everybody, if you'd like to go, if you have any questions, please ask those in the chat. I'm going to start to actually look at those questions. And Tracy, if you would actually tell everyone about some of our upcoming webinars.
Yes. So here on the slide, we're wanted to share that in addition to our weekly SaaS management demos on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we have an upcoming webinar on April 10th where we're going to be doing a deep dive into agentless desktop discovery. And for those of you who will be attending Atlassian's Team 24 event at the end of April, Torii will be a sponsor there, so be sure to stop by our booth to get some great giveaways. And as a reminder, we're going to be following up after today's webinar with the poll question gift card giveaway.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. I know that that agentless desktop discovery one in particular, I'm really excited for that. That's something we're really excited about here at Torii. We really think it's going to be transformative to the way that you're able to not just get visibility, but have better confidence about the state of not just SaaS, but your software. And the important thing is that we're trying to do it in a way that respects your security. So that's why we have this big emphasis on it being agentless, because we don't want to add more surface area for vulnerabilities or exposure to security risks. And so this is something we've been working hard on in the background. Hope you'll join us for that one, and for all these things, obviously, but that one in particular, hope you'll be sure to put that on your calendar. So I've actually got a good number of questions over here. I'm going to go through a few of them. So we've got one about how many branches can be added to one workflow? Well, okay. So to answer that question, I'm going to look at this and I'll say, here, this is the canvas. This is me zooming out on the canvas. You can fill this up. Essentially, the idea with this canvas builder, and part of the power of it, and why I like that, is that it's really more about what is the need that you are facing. And so we've got some really incredible workflows that have really been built out with multiple branches for multiple conditions that have filled up like a majority of this space. And so it's really more about what is usually more the issue, is that organizations don't necessarily have as much specificity about the things that they would use as conditions within those workflows. That's usually what ends up being the limiting factor for a lot of these. So Sarah is asking, can a workflow call another workflow? Yes, Sarah. So I think I'm gonna say yes first of all, and say one of the things I'm gonna make sure we actually have it in this instance. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Steve. So one of the things within Torii is that you can have something known as a parent workflow and something known as a child workflow. And the idea is that you can essentially use that parent workflow to call the child workflow. And so you see here, that's set up as a custom action. So within Torii, the important thing here is you have this branch and you've got this custom action. And what this custom action is doing is it's actually triggering another workflow. And you have the URLs that are associated with all of the different workflows. And it's setting off a trigger so that this knows that one of those conditions for that parent workflow is to set off the associated child workflow in this instance. So yes, that is very much possible, and it's something that a lot of our customers use quite extensively, actually. Dominic is asking, he's asking for more information about the workflow triggers. What are the workflow triggers? What kind do you have available in the system? That is a great question, and I actually meant to, I'm glad you asked that, Dominic, because I actually meant to show the screen earlier on. I got thrown off because we jumped over to reclamations to kick things off. But what Torii does is we have right here where you're creating a new workflow. If you select from scratch, it's not really from scratch because you're already being given some great preset starting points for these triggers. And it's really about criteria related to employees, applications, licenses, and contracts. That's generally how these triggers are set up. And it's based on these different tools, these different applications that you might have, that you might be using as your single source of truth, essentially. So user meaning a criteria. A great example of that is something like if you have something related to someone's position changes and you want to add or take away different apps that they have access to based on that new organization. That's information that you're not putting in Torii necessarily. You're probably updating Hi Bob or Bamboo HR. And so then Torii is looking for when that user meets the criteria, and that serves as the trigger. Same thing for when a user joins, when a user leaves, application meets a criteria, new app discovery, all of these can serve as triggers and starting points. License count thresholds, that's one we didn't really go into detail about. But if you have licenses and you want to keep an eye on how many you have left over, you can set up notification alerts for that. Or even ones, if you're a little bit more concerned with the security aspect, whenever a closed app is in use, you can also receive notifications and just kind of a heads up. And based on those workflows, you can decide how strict you want to be with enforcing, keeping those apps closed down. So thank you, Dominic. That was a great question. Can you schedule offboarding workflows across multiple time zones? Yes. So we showed that a little bit with the onboarding workflow, is that we had within the Bamboo HR, we had it scheduled based on your time zone so that you could say, every day when a new hire date is today, every day that happens Monday through Friday, it's going to make sure they get set up through this onboarding workflow at 6 a.m., for example. And you can set that up for multiple different time zones, and you can schedule it based on where your employees are. All right, this is from Charles. I saw that most of your notifications and approval triggers run through Slack. Do you also accommodate Microsoft Teams? Yes, we do. We do accommodate Microsoft Teams as well. So most of the users are often using Slack, but we do support Microsoft Teams as well. And also outside of that, there's also email that you can use as a fallback for communication. You can also use, we have a deep integration with Jira that is another mechanism for being able to delegate different tasks. The Jira one is actually a two-way, so that Torii is also able to run different actions based on what happens within Jira. So, all right, I think at this point, I just want to take a minute. Thank you everyone so much for your time. Really enjoyed being able to spend a beautiful afternoon with you all. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to Torii and we'll be happy to help you out with that. And so on behalf of Tracy, myself, the rest of the Torii team, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.